Hello everyone and welcome to the Masters Grand Prix interview room. Today's guest is the m55 World, European, multiple champion and UK record holder, and it's fabulous to introduce to you Donald Brown. So Donald, we're going to go for your first event, hurdles. Is that your main event?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. As far as the events are concerned, I would like to think so, yeah. I mean, my preference is 100 meters,
right.
But if I can stop falling over the hurdles, then that would be my favourite one, yes.
I can't believe you said that when you've already held the UK records for hurdles.
Yes, I mean, I've had a really good spell. The last sort of year has been brilliant. It really has. So it has become my... You know what? I'm actually still learning the event. And maybe I feel more competent in the sprints, the flat sprints. But I still feel I'm learning the event of the hurdles. So I am actually quite excited to see how much better I can improve, or how much more I can improve.
So would you spend a lot more time on hurdling now and hurdling technique rather than sprints, or is it like a 50-50 balance?
You know, it's a very good question, Darren. The joke is that I spent very little time on my hurdles over the past year and did very well. And that has given me even more sort of encouragement and enthusiasm to really focus on the technique. When I watch athletes like, you know, the Des Wilkinsons, the Greg Dunsons, and I look at their technique, the Mensa Elliots, I realize that they are proper hurdlers. And I've learned and continue to learn a lot from them. So to answer your question, I think I will be looking to focus even more technique-wise on the hurdles.
So the other question is, do you have somebody who looks after you? Do you have a coach in the hurdles and a coach in the sprints?
Yes, well, my former coach, when I say former coach, Joseph Keynes, who's the father of Daniel Keynes, he's based in Birmingham and he's been my long-time coach. I've since relocated to London and I've been very fortunate to now have Leon Braithwaite coaching me with a brilliant squad. And his brother Darren Braithwaite chips in as well. They're both phenomenal. And so in terms of focusing on specific events, Leon and Darren really focus on my sprints, so to speak. And every now and then, I'm fortunate if I can get someone like Tony Jarrett. I've had a session with him in terms of technique. But on the whole, I do need to spend more time fine-tuning my technique on all the hurdles.
Fantastic. So how long have you been into Masters Athletics? What age group did you start? Or where did you begin?
The joke is I popped over to America as an artist for 2 weeks, stayed there for 10 years, and whilst I was there, I discovered there was this thing called Masters Athletics. I was playing volleyball at the time and got really good, and was playing at a high level in New York. And a friend of mine, her name is Ruth Lynn Greenfield Webster, who you probably know, was also in the same volleyball squad. She was phenomenal, blocking everything. I jumped up to ride this bike. Anyway, she then told me that she formerly was a triple jumper, and I told her, oh, that's what I started off, the triple jumper. And I said to her, well, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot again. And she looked at me and laughed. And then I signed up for an event, went to a local meet. She turned up with spikes. We both competed, and we both got the bug again. And as you probably know, she went on to become a world champion and in triple jump. And then, but that was where I discovered Masters Athletics in America. I heard that there was a Heptathlon championships, and I hadn't done any athletics for ages, and about 13 years, I think. And so I entered and competed about 2 or 3 weeks preparation, and it was a national championships for the USA, and I won the gold medal.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, I like this. And then a couple of weeks later, there was the Pentathlon national championships. I entered that and won the gold medal there. And so that really sort of gave me the conviction that, I'm going to get back into this. And so both Ruth and I, we got into it. We started training and competing. And then when I came back to England, I started off as a decathlete and won the national gold medal a couple of times. And that was pretty much how I got back into it. So I was 2006 was when I first got back into it. So how old was I? In early 40s.
Yeah, because in 2007, did you go to Italy, Riccione?
Riccione, that was the first one I did.
Oh, the same as Jason Carty as well, because Jason Carty's first was Riccione 2007. That was my second championship. My first was San Sebastian in 2005. So that's when I come to it. So it's amazing that you come to doing heptathlon and decathlon. Was it you thought, this is bugger this, it's too hard, this decathlon and then moved to the hurdles and sprints?
Well, you know what? I was known back in the day when I did do some athletics at Wolverhampton Bilston Club. I was known as a general dog's body. You know, Donald, we can do the league meeting. Can you do the pole vault? Can you do the 200 meters? Can you do the hurdles? And so I was doing this, that, and the other. And I sort of fell into multi-event simply because I was a general dog's body for league meetings. And so with regards to the decathlon, it wasn't until Dalton Powell, where was it now? It was the Clermont-Ferrand, I think it was, where I'd entered the pentathlon.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll give the sprints a go. And so I won the bronze medal, I think it was, for the pentathlon. And got through to the finals along with Dalton Powell. And he won. I came second by 2/100ths of a second. Because I said to him before that, I'm not really a sprinter. And he looked at me and said, your times for the 100 as a decathlete is comparable to what the sprinters do. And so that encouraged me to give it a shot. And ever since winning that particular silver medal and becoming a European silver medalist, I sort of decided, you know what? I'm training for 10 events for one medal, or I'm training for one event for one medal. But to be quite honest, I do miss the decathlon. And I am tempted to go back every now and then, but I think it's time, having a business. I was formerly looking after my parents as a primary care, and it was just too much. And so it was better for me to focus on the hurdles and the sprints. I am tempted to look at the long jump again because I do miss that.
Wow, well, watch this space. We heard it first here. That you might be tempted to go and do long jump again. So, how is your feelings towards British Masters? Does anyone inspire you from Masters Athletics themselves? And how have you found being a part of that group?
I know this is going to sound really corny, and I know you're interviewing me, and it was funny because when you first approached me a few years ago and said, you're going to enter the decathlon, I think you remember, I laughed at you and I thought, yeah, right. And to see what you have achieved when I actually saw you doing it and competing and excelling in the high jump and this event and that event, and I thought, flip me, this guy is really serious. So when you talk about inspiration, there are so many athletes that are absolutely brilliant in terms of commitment, determination, drive, respecting the actual sport. Jason Cartier, as you well know, phenomenal story there. I mentioned before, Greg Dunson, Des Wilkinson. I could go on. What I find really encouraging with Masters athletes is the fact that they do not allow age to determine how they should live their life. And it is really much a choice, a lifestyle choice. Competitions, fantastic. Medals, great. But when you are healthy, you can't buy that. And to see so many athletes who subscribe to that and the camaraderie, I must admit, the camaraderie was one of the first things that blew my mind.
Yeah,
I go back
definitely.
to Greg Dunson because before I joined Masters Athletics, I'd heard so much and read so much about him and realized that if I did Masters hurdles, he would be my main rival, along with Des and Glenn Reddington and so forth. Greg and Des were very quick to point out techniques that I could do and how I could improve. They were my rivals.
Wow.
And I was surprised at how quick they took me under their wing and, were very encouraging and pointing out how I could improve as a hurdler. And in fact, Greg said to me, because Greg had been unbeaten for like a decade or something, and he said something to me which really encouraged me. He said, at the rate you're going, you could be the first one to beat me. As it turned out, that was the case. But for him to say that and to encourage me in that way, it's like, I'm your rival, I'm your competition. Why are you giving me all these hints and so forth? But then I'm the same kind of person. I'm very quick to encourage and advise and give whatever 2 cents worth of advice I can to whomever, because it's more than just about competing. It really is about understanding it is a family, and we are a group of individuals that need to not only support each other, but we also need the exposure, promotion and encouragement through the media and through ourselves as well. And that's one thing I really enjoy. And right now with the lockdown, I do miss just, going and training and chilling and the banter and being amongst fellow Masters athletes.
Definitely. I do miss all that myself. So we're going to go on to a little bit of your training. So can we talk about how often you train?
Right now, I've not done anything.
Well, in a usual track here, Donald.
Yeah. I normally train about 3 times a week: a Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, which is pretty much standard for most athletes. And if I can get to the gym once or twice a week, I will do that. So when I'm looking towards training for a competition, I'll probably increase the actual routines that I do in training. But in general, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays on the track.
Yeah.
And if I can do a Wednesday in the gym, I will do. And a little stuff at home as well when I can.
So what would be a specific, a session that you would do in the gym? What would that incorporate?
Well, in terms of my body type, I would focus on my areas, as I'm sure we all do, areas of weakness. And for me, legs is something, my knees are not what they used to be. I don't squat anymore. And so I have to find alternatives that will help me to strengthen my quads and my hammies and my calves. And so I focus on my legs. My shoulders, again, need to be strengthened. They used to be a lot stronger than they are now. But so sort of top half, I'll do one day doing, shoulders and lifts, arm curls, push-ups, bench presses. Yeah. And then I'll focus on sort of, the usual stuff. Nothing really different than I see other athletes doing. I do like box jumps.
So you would touch on plyometrics then?
Yes. I used to love, back in the day, doing plyometrics over hurdles, where you're bouncing over hurdles. Since my knees have been sort of playing up, I've had to sort of pull back on that. So I'm constantly experimenting. But I've created one or two things that have worked for me, which people, I know, they laugh at me when I do it. I've got this thing where, when you're pulling a sledge or a tire or something, what I do, I simply put it around me for about 30 kilos, and I'll just simply walk at walking pace all the way around the track. Take a break, walk all the way around until my legs are burning. But it's almost as though I'm going back to basics and just doing it slowly, and rather than sprinting, just walking and slowly building up my muscles. And I found that's really helped in regaining my high knee lift and giving me that strength. Just walking. Sounds really basic, but
would you walk with a high knee lift, or would you just walk normally?
No, I walk normally flat-footed, so I'm not overly straining my calves. Every now and then I'll focus on my calves and pull and walk onto my toes, onto my calves, and emphasize on my calves, and then go flat-footed again. But the other technique I have is where I tie ropes to my ankles,
right,
and the rope goes back and loops through a loop where I'm pulling like a weight, like a sledge, and the other part of the rope goes back to my other foot. And so that is where now I'm doing high knee lifts as I'm walking. So every high knee lift, I'm literally working those sections of my hips, and that really helps. That helps to bring back my high knee lift. If you watch me sprint these days, my knees are higher than my head.
Yes, and to be honest with you, I'd have to say, John, the other thing I've noticed about you is you look like you lost weight.
Yes.
So that's that big contributing factor.
Definitely. One thing I did a couple of years ago, very stupidly, and this is my naivety here, I weighed about, I think, 15 and a half stone. And I decided to go on a diet, not realizing that when you go on a diet, you're supposed to stay in the gym. I didn't do that. I just lost the weight. Right. And I came back to competition, and for about a year or so, I was so under par. Couldn't perform. It was then other athletes were telling me, "Donald, you've lost weight, you look great, but, what's happened?" And I said, "Have you been in the gym?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, I've never been on a diet. I've never lost a stone and a half before." So I didn't really know. And so I then regained the weight, and I started losing it again, but staying in the gym. And I think that's really helped towards me having a blistering 2019 and a great start to 2020.
Yes, it was noticeable that the transformation you made. And I suppose the good thing is, we've mentioned that throughout the years, have you adapted your training and learnt more about yourself over the years?
The one thing I've learned, and I really encourage masters, any athlete, to do this: listen to your body.
Yeah.
There came a point in time when, in my early 40s, when I was training with my squad in Birmingham, they were doing like 10 back-to-back 200s. We don't need to do that. Not at our less younger age, so to speak. And I realized that I could listen to my body, and I started doing maybe 200 meters with them, miss one, then do one with them, and listening to my body. And that, for me, has helped me to really become in tune with how I'm constantly changing as I grow less younger, and I can adapt and change. And the one thing I will say, which I think really helped in me having such a great 2019, prior to that, I'd never continued keeping my speed work going through the winter.
Right.
So at the end of 2018, I didn't stop doing blocks and sprints and so forth. And I came out, because normally I come out and I'm usually a second slower. But I came out at the beginning of 2019 and I was flying. And I was sharing my information, as you do, with other masters athletes. And I was talking to TJ, and he said, "Yeah, you shouldn't stop." You know, and to me it was like, "Oh, I didn't realize."
It's like a light bulb moment for you there.
Yes, it was, and it was. I realized that was something again that rather than stopping and doing all the heavy work, the hill works and which gives you strength, but also slows you down, keep the speed work going. And I think that for me contributed to me hitting that purple patch.
Well, to be honest with you, that's fantastic advice, because that's one thing I always say to the athletes, and people come from me advice to say, the one thing you lose quickly is your speed. So my always advice is keep working on your speed, because that's what you'll lose first. So do you do any sort of core stability exercise, stretching, mobility, and do you use massage in part of your training?
Massaging, if anybody knows Lawrence Lynch, he is the most ridiculous masseuse. I'm in tears by the time I'm finished having a massage with him. But yes, that is one of the things that I would, again, encourage athletes to have. Regular massage. Deep tissue, for me, works. It's painful, but it works. Stretching, mobility, absolutely. Core stability, again, very important. I've always had good core. Great abs, strong in my ab section in terms of doing sit-ups and so forth. So that's always been one of my strengths. But stretching, I found, is something that also really does help. TJ taught me about stretching in terms of not overly stretching before competition, because you can lose the elasticity that requires you to perform well. And so I've also learned to stretch after a training session more so than before competing. And so that is something that I'm also getting used to in terms of learning not just to stretch, but how to stretch and when to stretch. And that's something I think I hadn't done in previous years. I would train hard, do my session, and then jog, warm down, and go home. That's the time to stretch.
Well, it's good to hear you say this, Donald, because it sounds to me that we're all keep learning. We're never too old to keep learning.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
And that's what we're doing. We're all trying to work about how to train our bodies, different way. Listen to your body. It's great advice from yourself. Also, I'd like to point out, you mentioned TJ, but we don't know who TJ is. Some people might not know who TJ is.
Absolutely. His proper name is Tamaran NGA Ofori Osai. Tamaran NGA Ofori Osai is now M55, I believe. He is a multiple 8-time gold medalist, world champion, masters athlete, friend, coach, entrepreneur. He's just an amazing individual. Got his own squad, trains at Lee Valley. And for those who don't know him, he's a fellow masters athlete. And he's a world record holder, I think, in relays and so forth. The list goes on. Someone I greatly admire, and someone that a lot of young people look up to and admire, and he's a great role model. Well, and someone that when I grow up, I want to be like him.
I'll tell you what, Donnie, you've put him up there, haven't you? You put him on a pedestal there. So
absolutely.
That's well done to TJ. I know, obviously I know who he is, but for some people might not know who he is. So obviously you do trade down in London then? Is it Lee Valley you train at?
I'm training at Lee Valley right now, and it's interesting that you should say in terms of that we learn from each other. I was talking to Nick Lauder, who is also a masters athlete, great masters athlete. And I said to him, wouldn't it be great, and what you're doing right now is testament to what needs to be done. Wouldn't it be great if we had platforms or meetings or conventions, something whereby masters athletes could all come together as a group and just share their nuggets of information? And, you know, what you're doing now allows us to do that. And there is so much information that we can gain from each other. And if we had those kind of meetings where we could just sit and learn and talk, that would be a great opportunity. So again, I applaud you for what you're doing, because this really helps to sort of promote that agenda.
Yes, thank you very much, Donald. The other question, your first championships, how did you find that, and your first ever championships when you went to compete? Was it a lot harder than you thought?
Internationally?
Yes.
Riccione was my first one. It was a great experience. I was doing a decathlon, and I think before the high jump, yes, by the time I got to the high jump, I was 200 points ahead of everyone. The weather was such that by the time it was, 11 o'clock at night, I think it was, we were still competing.
Wow.
And I had waited and waited and made the childlike error of not staying warm. So I came in at a lower height, something like 165, I think it was at the time. And I failed. And I failed the second time. And I realized how just stiff and cold I was. The third time I ran, jumped, my head hit the uprights, split my head open, knocked the pole off, and I was out of the competition.
Oh, Donald.
I was devastated.
Well, yes, I feel devastated for you.
It was a lesson learned.
Yes.
It was my first international major competition, I think it was, that I did that. And it was interesting because the other athletes were looking at me, because I blitzed 100 meters, blitzed the long jump, and I was doing really well. And I was, as I said, a couple of 250 points ahead or something. And you could see that other athletes were sort of, they didn't know who I was. And obviously, failing and bowing out, it was a sobering moment to sort of think, wow, I really need to sort of take stock of what I've done and why I failed and so on and so forth. But it was a great experience. It actually gave me so much more intensity and enthusiasm to really get back, get home, train, because I knew I could win, or at least I knew I had a chance of medaling. And so that was a negative that I turned into a positive. And that's just the kind of person I am. If I fail at something, I'll try again, and hopefully do a Darren Scott and succeed.
Oh, thank you. Well, and no, the great thing is that people can take from that is that's words of wisdom in my eyes. It really does put it in a nutshell to me that if you do fail, bounce back and try and be that little bit better. And it doesn't matter what level you're at. I always say if you can go and set a season's best, a PB, or whatever age, then fantastic. Another one, do you take any supplements, as in multivitamins or anything for anything?
The usual stuff like protein shakes. What else do I do? Proteins. Every now and then I might take a bit of creatine if I'm feeling sort of just low to get my training up. But other than that, protein shakes and supplements like black seed oil, which is not something a vitamin, but it's more of an immune system. I find that when I travel a lot, I tend to pick up a cold quickly, and so I'm getting into things like turmeric, black seed oil, cod liver oil, and stuff that really just keeps my immune system up. Echinacea, and those kind of sort of helps to remedy me, and also ginger and boiling ginger and lemon, and having those kind of remedies regularly that keeps me, hopefully, my immune system up.
Yeah, that's the idea, is to look after your body as much as you can.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on, because I didn't ask you before, but I did touch on the weights in the gym. You said you don't really do squats anymore, so you do other leg exercises. So what sort of rep range would you do there then in the gym? Is it period where you do 10s and then come down, or how does it work for you?
To be quite honest, that's an area I do need to focus on more in terms of acquiring a better understanding of how to weight train. I'll do, like, for example, if I'm going to do bench presses, I will do 10, come down to 8, come down to 6, and that will be depending on the weight. But I don't really train to build muscle, I simply train to maintain. Right, and so in terms of, and it's quite varied as well, because no two weight sessions are really alike. And to be quite honest, and this might not be the smartest thing to do, what I do, I'll go to the gym, and I'll listen to my body and think what needs to be focused on. And usually if it's, my legs, I'll do a leg session. And if I'm doing leg curls, for example, again, I like to do maximums, which is, I'll sit down and just go and go and go and go and go, and I'm doing leg curls until I'm burning. And then I'll walk that off, and then I'll go and then do maybe 3 or 4 sets. I like doing maximums just to get the burn, and then to do a bit more after that. But I don't really have a set routine.
Right, well, it sounds to me you're a bit sadistic because you're going to do high-intensity workouts where you just constantly like 50 reps or something. I know I'm exaggerating, but then you like to walk around with tyres of 30 kilos. So to me, you're not quite right there, Donald. You've got some sort of problem. Maybe we need to. Yeah, but it just shows how much dedication and hard work you put in, and again, it's what suits you. So, out of athletics, so have you got any other hobbies that or your interests that you do outside of Masters Athletics?
Well, I'm an award-winning sculptor, as many of the athletes already know, and what I like to do is incorporate my art with my sport. And one particular sculpture I've created, which is called A Sporting Chance for Peace, features a multiplicity of different sports. And I use sports as a vehicle to educate young people. I go into schools a lot, and colleges and corporate events, and I promote health and wellness through sports. And it's great to be able to do that and be announced as, a championship, a gold medalist, and so on and so forth, because they listen to you. And very often when you excel and become, as we are, certainly you are, an elite Masters athlete, when we become successful in a particular area, people don't expect you to be elite, so to speak, in another area. Yeah. So for me, when I'm introduced as an award-winning sculptor and also a world champion or a European champion athlete, it sort of boggles the mind, because there's a saying that goes, jack of all trades and masters of none, and I don't buy into that. I believe you can be masters of many trades. And so for me, I have the opportunity of incorporating my art and promoting Masters athletics, because one of the things that we are as Masters athletes, we are positive role models. We bridge the gap between the generations, because a lot of young people, when they see me, and I'm sure yourself, on the track running, they don't realize our ages. And because of that, in fact, TJ, Cameron NJ for your side, once said to his squad, whilst I was sprinting training, he said to his squad, "How old do you think that guy is?" I was in about 55 at the time. And they said late 30s. Ooh, thank you. When he told them my age, they were shocked. But the key here was they listen to me now. The respect I get from them is phenomenal. And I think it's important for us as Masters athletes to understand that we bridge that gap, and that we can show that life does not end at 30. And the general consensus is that after 30, it's all downhill. And a lot of people, they subscribe to that and buy into that and become couch potatoes. And so for me, using art as a vehicle to promote determination, respect, discipline, patience, humility, all of the things that we need as Masters athletes to become successful, we can apply them to other areas of life. One of the things I do with my art is to address bullying and violence. And so I use art and sport to show that, when you encounter conflict on the streets, the skills you developed in sport, and it doesn't have to be athletics, it can be football, basketball, whatever it is. In order to be good at those sports, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to be patient, you've got to be a good team player, you've got to be able to communicate well. And these are all skills that you can take into other areas of life. So as I said, if you encounter conflict on the streets, rather than it escalating, use those skills that you've developed through sport to squash and resolve those issues. And that's one of the things I'm using my art and sport combined,
fantastic,
as well as public speaking, to address many of the social ills that we have.
That's fantastic to know. See, Donald, not everyone knows that, but they'll know now. So what we'll do is, after the interview, we will put a link to the art.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic to use. So going forward now, so have you got any future goals?
Future goals, yes, I certainly want to continue competing. I would like to be able to play more of a significant role as someone that can nurture young athletes, not necessarily a coach, and actually nurture young people, because I really believe that a platform is being prepared and is being prepared for me. In fact, if I can quickly show you this book, which just came out on Amazon a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, just lift it up a little bit more, Donald.
Sorry.
Yes, no, that's brilliant. Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
By a best-selling author, Sudhana Singh. And in there, this is again predicated as a result of my success last year as an athlete. And she's written a chapter on me as an athlete, as a speaker, as a sculptor. And the beauty of that is sometimes we as masters athletes don't realize the credibility that we have, that we've achieved, and how we can use that in other areas. I had no idea I would end up in a chapter of a best-selling author's book. But that's the result of the success I've been blessed with in athletics, and of course through my art as well. And so my future agenda is, how do I use these accolades to make a difference? For me, it's about having a purpose in life. I love winning medals and I love competing. I love encouraging others. But what's my purpose in life? What's my legacy? What am I here to achieve? And how can I give back? And so, to answer your question in a nutshell, my goals are to ensure that I have and leave a legacy that inspires and empowers both young and old, and that people can see that you don't have to just focus on one particular area of life, and that you can master many trades, and to be a positive role model. That's a general sort of overview of my goals.
That's fantastic, and I'm sure it is, because you inspire me and all the time. All the athletes do, but it's been brilliant. So it's been a privilege chatting to you, Donald. I hope we meet again soon on the track after we go through lockdown, but it's been a privilege. It's just been fantastic, and thank you for your support of the Masters Grand Prix.
Darren, listen, for all the work that you have and continue to do, I applaud you too, mate. And that's what we need. We need innovative young men and women like yourself, not that you're a woman, of course, but we need innovative young athletes like yourself, spearheading, pioneering, breaking the ground in ways that you're doing, and continue. And I continue to encourage you, I applaud and celebrate you as an individual, as a friend, and as a fantastic athlete. Well done, mate.
All right, thank you very much, Don. It's been a pleasure.